Ted Williams by Ben McNally. Ted Williams wasn't just a baseball player. He was truly a baseball god and hero. He changed the game in so many ways that people can't keep track of all of them. Theodore Samuel Williams was born on August 30th, 1918 in San Diego, California, to his father Samuel Stewart, who was a photographer, storekeeper, and U.S. Marshal, and his mother, May Williams, who was a Salvation Army preacher. Unfortunately for Williams, he was abandoned by his father and only had a mother growing up. Williams then decided at a young age to be the greatest hitter who ever lived. He just didn't know it at the time. Although his career was mostly with the Red Sox, he began his career with the San Diego Padres in the minor leagues in 1936 and moved on to another minor league team called the Minneapolis Millers for about a year, but was then traded to the Boston Red Sox in 1937, which would be one of the biggest trades in history, at least in the Red Sox point of view. After a couple years in the minor leagues, he played in his first season in the major leagues with the Red Sox. The day he played his first game, the world and history itself would never be the same again. After putting up an average of .336, 27 home runs, and 129 RBIs in his first two seasons, he set a record that will probably never be broken ever again in history. In 1941, he finished the season with a .406 average, which is still the highest ever by a player in a single season since. People began to realize that he was a good ball player, but they didn't know that he'd be the greatest of all time. Unfortunately, after the 1942 season, Williams was called to serve in World War II from 1942 to 1946, which would put a damper on his tremendous career. Fortunately for Williams, he had 20/20 vision, which would help him greatly as a baseball player and more importantly as a fighter pilot. Once he returned to Boston, he continued playing baseball where he left off. Over his next 5 seasons, he averaged .338, 32 home runs, and 125 RBIs per season. Unfortunately, again, he was called to war to fight in the Korean conflict from 1952 to 1953, missing most of those 2 seasons. Over Williams' prodigious career, he was a very private man, and was not a friend of sports reporters. He was known to have tantrums. Some fans didn't like him either. One game after he dropped a ball, he spit at the booing fans and vowed to never tip his cap to the crowds again. He actually almost ended his career in 1938 before even starting it after putting his fist through a water cooler. Even though he had terrible social skills, that didn't matter to him. It has been argued that he was the greatest hitter to ever live, but if it wasn't for his 5 years fighting for our country overseas and 2 injury years, he could have padded his stats even more. Over his career, he had an average of .344 per season, had 521 career home runs, and is second to only Babe Ruth in history in career slugging percentage. He collected a surplus of nicknames over his career, including The Kid, Teddy Ballgame, and most famously known as the Splendid Splinter. As he began to grow older, he suffered several strokes that left him partially blind while in his 70s. Unfortunately, on July 5, 2002, the world lost a true legend of the game of baseball. Ted Williams passed away peacefully at his home in Crystal River, Florida. He was 84. After his death, the world was never the same. Before dying, he told his family he wanted to be cremated. Unfortunately, his youngest children fought to have him frozen, and they eventually did get him frozen into 2 pieces, his head and the rest of his body. This process was done in Scottsdale, Arizona. The reason I chose Ted Williams was he is one of my favorite baseball players, and he has done so many heroic things. What he did was put up numbers that only a superhuman could, and sacrificed his life for our country. If he didn't serve in the wars, he probably would have been the best of all time, but in my opinion, he already is.